Thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me to this great conference. I am very happy to be here in Berlin after many years. The last time I came here was in 1994 on my first Interrail. I was 18 years old at that time. And who would have said now I am here to deliver a talk? Thank you very much. My name is Marco. I work in the IT sector since ever, first in Italy. I am Italian, as you can understand from my accent. But I live in London since 13 years now, so all I have learned, the best thing I've learned in this industry, I've done it in London. And today I'm going to share with you a few of my ideas. This talk is a socio-technical journey, but it is a journey into my mind. And I'm here to share with you some of my thoughts, just because sometimes I stop and I think maybe I am crazy. And the only way I have to see if it's true or not is to share my ideas with you. So if I am crazy, please come back later and tell me. In my life, I have seen a lot of teams. I've seen a lot of teams succeeding. And I've seen a cowboy team succeeding without no methodology whatsoever. I've seen them succeeding. And I've seen also an agile team, or team that claim to apply DDD, succeeding. But I have seen those teams also failing. I've seen teams applying DDD or agile methodology failing miserably. And I ask myself always a question, why? What is the root cause of this, right? Because it's not the methodology. Otherwise, you apply DDD, you always win, right? And I come to the conclusion that it's just the outcome of a series of decisions, right? We make decisions all the time. Most of the time, we don't even think about it, right? Now, you are here today. You made the decision to come here. But many other decisions are coming without we think too much. And actually, it looks a little bit like this, right? If we take enough decisions that take us closer to the goal, we, at the end, are going to reach it. If instead we take enough decisions that take us away from the goal, we don't reach it, right? It's a little bit like this. And every node is a decision. And once I take as a decision, the consequence of that decision is putting me in front of a different one. And based on what we choose, we can have different paths. That doesn't mean we cannot reach the goal, right? For example, if we have to choose a cloud provider, we can choose Azure, we can choose Amazon, we can choose Google. And that decision will take us through a different path. But not one of those decisions can impede us to reach the goal. The problem is that we see the tree a little bit like this, right? We don't know what are the next decisions. We know just the first one. And once we make that decision, at that point, we see the next options, right? And so on, until we eventually reach the goal, right? That's why Claude Shannon said, we know the past, but cannot control it. We control the future, but cannot know it, right? And so it is really about how we take decisions, right? So I was thinking, how do we take decisions? Well, obviously, right? My first answer was obviously, we have an amazing brain, right? That's how we take decisions. The more intelligent we are, the better decision we take, right? That should be the way. But reading stuff around, I realize, right, that we are not so rational. Sorry for the audio. It doesn't play with the system. I play it from the laptop. It's okay anyway, I see. So the question is still, why? Right? I was doing all these talks and reading random stuff. I like to read a lot of random stuff, and I tried to connect the dots. And I one day arrived to read about bounded rationality, right? This concept is quite banal on the surface, because the concept of bounded rationality says that human makes quite reasonable decisions, but they are limited by the time available to make them, the relevant information that they have, and the cognitive limitation of our mind, right? Now, the time available to make decisions is easy to understand that it has an impact, right? When you are under pressure, everything is more difficult, right? And of course, the relevant information, it's clear. If we don't have all the information, it's impossible to take the right decision, right? And so what is the best way to trick a system to do something different than what it told, but just withhold some information? And then, and then the cognitive limitation of our mind, right? So if you don't believe this, wait, I have a few examples. Right? So how can we improve our decision? Well, if we understand the cognitive limitation, we can use them in our advantage. And we can optimize the information flow of the system in order to get the relevant information at disposition to who has to make decision. Essentially, we can expand the boundary of our rationality. So, let's have a look at our unconscious mind, right? Let's have a look about why we are not so rational. So to do that, I tell you a few stories, right? So this is an experiment they made trying to see if they were able to influence the customer choice on a shop based on, without them to realize it, right? So the experiment was with two different kind of wines. This is French wine and German wine. And they choose a few shops, both in France and Germany, and ran the experiment in both countries at the same time. And the experiment was very simple. They tried to see if playing in the background in this shop very strong national-related music for a whole week was changing the customers' decisions, right? So they started with the French one, right? The first week, they played, both in Germany and France, very strong French song in the background in the shops. Guess what? In that week, French wine outsold German wine. Now, you will say, yes, of course, French wine is very popular. You know, if we made this with beer, it would be a different story, right? Okay, so then the week after, they did it with German song, both in Germany and France. Guess what? In that week, even in France, German wine outsold French wine, right? Interesting. That's how they start to realize that this bounded rationality was very good to sell stuff. That's why Herbert Simon won a Nobel Prize for economics, not for engineering, right? So the next story, that happened in Amsterdam. On the 70s, there was an energetic crisis in Europe. And so every country started to pay attention of energy consumption. And in the Netherlands, there was a neighborhood recently built near Amsterdam, where they noticed a very, very strange pattern. They realized that 33% of these houses, that a set of these houses, was consuming 33% less energy. They could divide their houses in two sets. But that doesn't make sense, because the houses were all the same. So they were like, how is it possible that we can really divide these into subsets? And so they sent people there in this neighborhood to investigate this matter. And what they found was something very, very interesting. The only difference between these two sets of houses was this. The less young among you will recognize this. This is an old meter of electricity. The more electricity the house is consuming, the faster the wheel spins, right? It was very popular once upon a time. So the difference was that the houses consuming less electricity had this device installed in the front door. So every time people were out and in back home, they will see these wheels spinning, and that will remind them that they were consuming a lot of electricity. The other houses had it installed behind the staircase, so no one's never gonna see it. That only thing made 33% saving in electricity, right? Unbelievable. Do you really think you are so rational? Well, this story is, I took this story from this great book of Donella Meadow. Let's do another experiment, and let's see. Now, this is an interactive experiment. I will project here some things. You have to read it. But I don't leave it on the screen long time, so you need to be quick to tell me what you see. Are you ready? So the first one is easy. ABC, cool. ABC, correct. Next one. There you go. 12, 13, 14. Correct. There we go. But, there you go. That symbol was the same in both slides, right? And the thing is that our mind doesn't work as we think. Our mind has an unconscious preprocessing of information, which, based on the context, transform our feelings, our sensation, our input in something that then is passed to our conscious mind. And this happens in near real time. In the other case, you see, based on the context, our brain just assumes things and pass it in our conscious mind. There is an unconscious preprocessing of information near real time. Our mind makes up the holes of our understanding by itself really quickly. And obviously, context matters also in our mind, as we have seen. If you like to read more stuff like this and to see how our brain is biased, I suggest you this book by Cordelia Fine. It's plenty of examples of our brain deceive us, right? So, how does rationality work? Well, rationality works essentially in two ways. There is deductive rationality, which is very similar as how you play tic-tac-toe. And then there is inductive rationality, which is more similar of how you play chess. Sorry. So, deductive rationality, right? Tic-tac-toe. Have you ever lost a match of tic-tac-toe? Yes, when you were bored, or when you were tired, or when you didn't care anymore, right? Because the deductive logic, deductive rationality, is perfect, is logic, is unbeatable. If and only if we have all well-defined information to identify the best solution, and we have the capacity for processing that information, right? Tic-tac-toe, it's easy. The possible matches are not that many, so you can actually work out what is a path to a winning game. When you play chess, it's not possible. It's too many, right? Only computers can do that, right? And in effect, our mind is not really good in deductive rationality. Even if you are super smart or you think you are, computers are way better than our mind is. That's why we use it. That's what they can do really well. Instead, inductive rationality is a little bit different, right? Because the problem is that being not that good with deductive rationality, the only thing we can really have as a heuristic is our experience, right? So what our mind is instead really good is identifying patterns, right? And so when we cannot process all the information of the problem, or we have some holes that we have seen before, what our mind does is to fill that hole with something behind the scene. And so we actually have like a model of reality filled randomly or educatively by our mind in the gaps. And it's on that model that our deductive rationality then acts. Right? It works a little bit like this. We have a lot of information. And then, from this information, our mind builds a simplified model. And this is the point. How does our mind build this simplified model? Well, there's many ways, right? It can be random, right? How many of you can play chess? Can you play chess? How many of you have done a tournament of chess? How many of you have read book about chess? How many have done professional tournament about chess? That's all level of building that model, right? When I was young, I used to love play chess a lot. I played for many years. But I just self-play with my friend. I just loved it and play a lot. But once in my early 20s, I met this guy. And I realized they told me, oh, he's a regional champion of chess. I was like, oh, my God, I want to play with this guy. So I went there. And, well, he was super happy. We did the first match. And it actually lasted more than I expected. And then after a while, obviously, he trashed me, right? And after the game, it was like, oh, wow, I really enjoyed to play with you. I didn't expect it. And then he asked me, but have you ever read a book about chess? I was like, what? Are there books about how to play chess? And that opened a world to me, right? So he gave me next time a book about chess. I started reading it. And then after that, we started to play regularly. And after a while, I say, oh, wow, I see that you read my book. I enjoy so much more playing with you now, right? So you can actually train your mind on how you build the simplified model. And then at the end of the story, I say, but why did you stop? You are so good. He trashed me all the time. I draw once with him. That was it. I say to me, I arrived at a level where reading books and doing matches was not enough. I had to memorize matches of the champions in order to recognize the pattern much quicker when I was playing with people really good. And I say, when I had to do that, it was too boring. I couldn't really put my mind on memorizing stuff. I say I gave up. Right? And it makes sense. But then, after we build this model and we act on our model with our limited rationality, there is another thing that matter, right? Because we take action and we have feedback for that action, right? When you play chess, you have a very quick feedback because the feedback is the moves of your opponent, right? You can see if your opponent put you in difficulty, you start to doubt about your model in the first place. So, how these work in complex systems, right? In socio-technical complex systems, the problem is bigger than that. Because when we have people, we have communication flowing. And the more people we had in a team, the more communication lines we have. And this generates entropy. The information don't flow exactly as we expect. And entropy tends to maximize itself. So the thing is that our mind, at a certain time, doesn't cope anymore with all this complexity. And once we are not rational as a team in our outcomes, and the other teams are not rational anymore in their outcome, all triggers a lot of assumptions. And And so here the situation becomes a little bit more difficult because it is something like this. We still have the same model, but the way we build that model, it's not just for our own. It's a model we need to share with our team in order to be able to take decisions. It's useless if I have a model and everyone has a different one in the team. Have you ever reached some situation where it's impossible to find consensus? It's impossible because not the people are stupid or more intelligent. It's impossible because they use behind the scene a different model where they apply their intelligence. They are, in effect, not sharing enough information. So the way this tree is built is based on what we share. And it can be bias, or it can be experience, or knowledge, or practices and habits, or understanding, or wisdom. It depends on how many things you share or don't share in the team. And then, also in the team, you take action. But in a team, feedback is not so banal like in a chess game, right? You really need to look for the feedback because it's delayed in time. And if teams don't look at the feedback, it's like playing chess without caring on the move of your opponent. How many games will you win in that way? And so it boils down on feedback loops and how we build the shared model. And how do we build the shared model? Well, that has to do with culture, right? Have you ever seen this on Twitter? This is an old meme, right? Culture, it's strategy. So let's see a little bit about feedback loops, and then let's see how to improve the culture. So, feedback loops. Well, feedback loops, we have many, right? All these agile practices, pairing, unit test, acceptance test, release plan, all these are feedback loops. And nature is wise when feedback is rapid, right? John Gall, the System Bible. So let's see, agile principles, right? We continuous delivery of valuable software. What is that? It's feedback. It's feedback from the team to the world about what we are building. Deliver frequently, right? Fast feedback. And then business people and developers must work together. Why? Because they exchange feedback. It's all about feedback. More. Working software is the primary measure of progress because that's what we give as a feedback. The most efficient and effective method is face-to-face. Why? Because face-to-face limit entropy. We can get information flowing in the most effective way. That's a feedback. And at regular intervals, we should do retro, and that is a feedback about how we do. It's all about feedbacks. And I recently, I prepared this presentation long ago, but recently I saw at Software Craftsmanship, Goiko, with a presentation where he was saying many things about feedback, right? And this is the same concept. Just calling it feedback doesn't mean that it has fed back. It hasn't fed back until the system changed course. This is John Gall in the Systems Bible. So feedback is not just about knowing, it's to act on that information. And what I find particularly interesting is when you get into a culture of actually deliberately research for feedback, which is a culture of experimentation. And one of the best tools that I use for experimentation is the popcorn flow, which is a 7-step approach in order to devise experiment and keep the history of all the experiment we have done, just because it's more important to have failing experiments than successful ones, because that's where you really learn. And so that's, my friend Claudio called it a learning stream. And as I say, inertia is your enemy. If change is hard, make it continuous. This is the holy grail of a team, in my opinion. But apart from feedback, culture, right? But what is culture? Brandolini is not here, but at the same conference where Goico was a really nice slide of Brandolini. I'm sorry, it's not very clear because it has been sent to me from some people. So the quality of the image was bad from Twitter, right? Culture is the cumulative effect of a winning behavior within a given context, right? It's a very interesting definition, right? But it's a cumulative effect, Alberto say. It's an effect, right? The definition that I like the most comes instead from Bob Marshall. That says, culture is a read-only manifestation of the collective mindset. And the collective mindset are the beliefs, the assumption, the attitude that the organization as a whole holds in common about work, right? Holds in common means that it's shared, right? That's what allows us to build a great shared model to make decisions. And so what Bob says is, that it's the collective mindset of an organization that determines its degree of effectiveness and overall success, right? Like if the effectiveness of an organization is a function of its collective mindset. So there's another question, right? How do you change the collective mindset, right? It's easier said than done, right? So let me tell a story. I received the feedback last time from the DDU when I gave this talk. They say, well, I would like a better takeaway. I don't know what is the takeaway of this talk. So I changed the finale. Now I tell you a story to take away. Maybe you know it already. I don't know. It was in '84. Apple just launched the first Macintosh. And there was a car factory in Sunkist, California, right? Managed by General Motors, which had few problems, right? It was considered by many the worst in General Motors. Absenteeism over 20%. Frequent strikes, but in Italy it's the same. And then terrible quality with several episodes of sabotage, right? There's a story of people putting empty Coke bottle in between the doors. So when the car was going fast, the door will shake inside, the Coke shake inside the door and make noise to the customers. But also, it was actually a marketplace for alcohol, drugs, and prostitution, right? Very nice place to work, right? So General Motors had this problem, and they had to shut down the factory. Right? It was going so bad that it was terrible. So they needed help, and at that time in the car industry, Toyota was very famous with the Toyota production system. So they actually did a partnership with Toyota, and basically General Motors put the factory and the plants and the people, and Toyota was in charge to put the management and a different production system. Right? So General Motors thought also they could maybe learn something from that. And that's how NUMMI started, the New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporation. And so the Toyota management came there and restarted completely from scratch the production. So, by the year 1985, after only 1 year, Nomi was producing cars at the same speed as those produced in Japan. Absenteeism dropped to a steady 2%. Workers' union loved the Toyota production system, and the quality was General Motors best with the lowest defect ratio, and all this with the same people that were working there before, including the troublemakers. Isn't that a success? Almost unbelievable. You can double check it happened. So, how did they do it, right? And here I find really interesting an interview to John Shook, a former employee of General Motors, choose to go to Japan and learn the Toyota production system to then come back in US and train other people on the same system, right? And let's see what John said. He said, the only thing that changed was the production and the management system. And as a consequence, the culture. See, culture is hugely important, but you don't change the culture by trying to directly change the culture. It says it's easier to act your way to a different way to think than to think your way to a different way to act. So, how do we change the culture? This is the recipe of John, and I believe it's very, very true. It says, define the things that we want to do, the ways we want each other to behave, provide extensive training for it, and then do what is necessary to reinforce those behaviors. The culture will change as a result. It's a little bit like this, right? We have action, we have the mindset, and the result is the culture, right? Once upon a time, I was thinking, that's how you change, right? You change the way you think, and then that should make you change the way you behave, while it's not very true, right? The path to evil is plenty of good intentions, right? The thing is that it's the other way around. You change behavior, and then without realizing, you change the way you think. If there is a takeaway, I think this is. But the thing is that it's important to realize that since our mind is not as rational as we thought, it means that we are fallible, right? We are human. So we need to take in consideration that no one is perfect, and there is a deeper reason that things work. And still John Shook that explain us what is the deepest reason. I say the question they made him is, well, what is the main difference from before, right? If you have to pick one thing, what was the main difference? And that's what he said. The difference was teamwork. Before there were none. After, we were working as a great team. The ability to focus on solving problems without pointing fingers and looking to place the blame on someone. He said, here it's 5 whys. At home, it was 5 whos, right? And I have, at this point, I cannot not talk about Edward Deming, right? 95% of the worker's performance depend on the system. What does it mean? It means that if somebody make a mistake, it's 5% his fault and 95% the system that didn't prevent him to make that mistake. So it's never just someone's fault. So blaming the single doesn't make sense. It's focusing on improving the system that makes the difference. And Yes. So the thing is that then we are in a socio-technical system, right? And at the end of the day, we have come to the conclusion that difficulties of a technical nature in reality just add more the problems of a social nature. This is myself from our book. And this is the reason why I come to talk about system and about people more than about technical things. If you have a team spirit and some good people, it's just a matter of time that all the team will become as good as the best you have. Because when a team is full of team players, everybody in that team is more focused on give instead of receiving. And this is because they are team players. And I here think if we want to improve something in the way we work and we want to start from ourselves, the best thing we can do is begin to try to be an ideal team players. And here, Patrick Lencioni wrote a few great books, right? How is an ideal team player? Well, Lencioni say an ideal team player has three main qualities. He is smart, but smart, it means emotionally smart, right? He understands that his actions has consequences, and so it doesn't overdo things if they have an impact on the group, right? And then he's hungry. An ideal team player wants to do a job well and is motivated inside to do the best every time. And the last quality, but to me the most important and the most difficult to find, is humble, where humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. It's about always be available when there is some others to help and when there is some knowledge to give and when we can and when we are able to put ourselves second and the team first. We are, after all, human, and as Russell Lakoff says, science pursues data, information, knowledge, and understanding, right? What is truth? But humanity pursues wisdom, what is right. The thing is that our brain is biased, but usually our feelings at the end tells the truth. So it's always important to keep open a connection to your heart. And my final takeaway is work in environments where you can put your heart in what you do. Thank you. So question, there's still 10 minutes time. I am for once before schedule, so I can take questions if you want. Yes? Yes? I think it's fantastic if the company doesn't. As my friend Claudio says, processes are made by man, and by man can be taken off if they are not useful anymore. I believe, actually, the way I try to work, let's say I think it's easier to grow a system than to change it in course. And when I grow a system, I try to don't put processes in unless they are strictly necessary and help to reduce the entropy. So in your case, I will try to see if I can remove processes. But then I really need to understand it a little bit more in detail to be absolutely. Tobias? Yes, that's a big problem. I think things like SAFE and or SAFE or I think a lot like Martin Fowler about SAFE. I think they are a facade. They are just a way for the system to show that it's changing, but they change the surface, but not change inside. And the fact that it's imposed, it just proved this, right? If it was a real change, it would come from the bottom and from the top say, yes, let's do it, instead of being from the top. Yes, I think it's very, very hard to change a Big Bang. Right? Big Bang approach on a system is always hard or close to impossible, in my opinion. What you can do is start from a small place where you remove the barriers and get a team to really self-organize and find a way to work. And that is in the context of a company that might really work with other teams around. So actually, as my friend Claudio say, you can use the virus principle, he calls it. So it's a team that works really well. What happened is that the other teams around might see the team working really well, and they start to be interested about this. Oh, wow, how did you do that? Let's try it ourselves, right? And then you have maybe another team that tried that, and it works. And that creates more interest until you have all the teams that wants to do that, because actually it's proven that it works. It takes time, right? So they say, oh, I want to transform it in 1 month. That's impossible. I cannot guarantee you how long it's gonna take. I can tell you how I will do it, but I think that would be cool work in my mind. Other questions? Don't be shy. Yeah. Well, let's say that what I like about DDD is that, as Eric Ivan puts it, it's a philosophy. It's not a recipe or technique or patterns or magic thing. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of collaboration. Right? To me, the team spirit, it is a thermometer to see how well and how effective the organization is. If I go in a place where I see a lot of team really cohesive, that play well together, I have good impression. I think this company allows these people to act as a team. It means that there is a good mindset. And in those environments, you can easily try out collaborative things. While in places where you see every developer there with the set-driven development, I call it, where they go there and they code by themselves all day long and take it up and go home. In those environments, it's more difficult, right? I am now working in a startup where I am facing exactly that problem. They had to start really quickly, so they get an agency to kick off the project. And now, since 3 months, the new leadership team is there, and I arrived there, and the first thing I see is these headset-driven developers doing like that. And then the business don't talk with the product owners, and so I was like, guys, we don't collaborate here. And so I started with event storming. It's about getting people together and talk. That is the first step. Absolutely. Organize. The way I've done it was like, okay, we need to organize an event storming with the people of the key people of the company, because I have no idea what you want to build. I asked to the teams. They aren't able to give me a holistic idea of what we build. Somebody have an idea here, somebody there. It's all blurry. I say we need to understand, to build a common understanding. And so I selected people from the business. The first time we did it, people from the business came there and said, why do we do this? We did it already 3 months ago. Yes, but many people has been hired recently. We don't know what you did before. Oh, there's plenty of charts we have done in that time, right? And my explanation was like, yes, but we can't understand charts. We want conversation. We want to have a conversation with you. The charts are not the most important part. We have questions that we would like to be answered. And so they agree just to make us a favor in the beginning. But after they've done the first time, they started to talk to each other. They started, the finance people talk with the operation. You do this because that, now I understand. And, I start to let them talk. And, it was amazing because after the first 15 minutes that they were not very happy to be there, they just forgot it and they start to talk and to exchange information. And then after the first big picture, there was a lot of subjects where there were not enough information. And they came to me to say, we need to do another of these to talk about that. Yeah, it was fantastic. After they understand the value that they get from that, then it's them that ask you for more. So, but they cannot really understand it until they do it. That's the point. You're welcome. So that's it. Thank you very much again.